not just the most important game on Wisconsin football's 2025 schedule, but maybe the most important game of the Luke Fickell era in Madison. Today, we are talking with, formerly of BadgerBlitz.com, now my colleague at BadgerNotes.com. It is Seamus Rohrer here on Talkin Badgers. Welcome to Talkin Badgers, powered by BadgerNotes.com, your favorite daily Wisconsin Badgers show. I am your host, Kedrick Stumbris. You can find me on the website formerly known as Twitter at Kedrick Stumbris, also on Blue Sky, and follow the show at Talkin Badgers on the website formerly known as Twitter. Hope you joined us yesterday in yesterday's show for a banger of a reunion with the guys for a little bit of Talkin Badgers After Dark. And depending on which of the YouTube comments you read it, you may love us or hate us, undetermined at this point in time. But we're doing a little bit of a run back of what we did yesterday for a little bit of a preview into this Wisconsin football season in 2025. We are joined by my colleague at Badger Notes. That is Seamus Rohrer. He's coming up next. We are joined now by Seamus Rohrer, columnist at BadgerNotes.com. Seamus, as we were just talking about before we hit the record button, first time the two of us are actually connecting live on a camera or otherwise, and really, really happy to have you here on Talkin Badgers.
I know, man. It's great to be here. Like I said earlier, man, you're doing great work. Love the little podcast kind of format we got going up on Badger Notes daily, every other day, whatever you guys want to do. But man, I think I'm excited for the work we're gonna put out this season and what we're gonna do moving forward. So just happy to be here, man.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit before we dive into your latest column? Why don't you talk a little bit about what you're bringing over to the site on BadgerNotes.com?
Well, I appreciate it, man, because just, for a while I was a kind of boots on the ground beat writer guy over at Badger Blitz, to going to every practice, going to every interview. No longer based in Madison, so here we are. Sort of taking a step back from more of that day-to-day, in the trenches kind of grind. But man, I'm not ready to stop talking about the Badgers. So basically just want to keep offering my opinions and analysis and just however I can, however it makes sense to me. But just love writing columns, love writing analysis. Still going to be doing some, more traditional reporting, interviews, things like that from time to time. Some film breakdowns, maybe if we can figure out our relationship with PFF. But otherwise, man, just kind of here for wherever Badger Notes needs me. But yeah, just happy to be able to contribute to the site. I like the direction it's going, and I think we're going to do some good work here this season.
That's great, and I know Seamus is just a really big part of what we're trying to do at Badger Notes. Just differentiating that word from a real one, apparently, ourselves on the site from a little bit of the other Badgers coverage out there. Give just something a little twinge different. But today we're doing something a little bit the same as what you may have heard on this show yesterday with me, Dylan Graff, Ryan Eilers, and Jason Long, and just running through the schedule, see what Wisconsin football is going to get up to in 2025. And Seamus is a little bit more optimistic than I am on this upcoming season. So if anybody's looking for a little bit of a different twist, we have it for you. And we're going to run through the schedule, not quite game by game, but go through most of it here. And we're going to start with the opener, as we are 1 week away recording this Thursday morning on August 21st.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, Holy 1 week, a college football Thursday, as God intended.
Yes.
We start with Miami of Ohio and the Wisconsin Badgers inside Camp Randall Stadium. And Seamus notes in his column, he believes Wisconsin wins this game. But I love that you mentioned, because Dylan mentioned this yesterday on the show too, Wisconsin has a little bit of a checkered history with some of these more mobile quarterbacks like DeQuan Finn. And you mentioned these middle linebackers in Wisconsin have been highly touted. What is your belief level in the talent of these inside linebackers in Madison, of keeping up with a DeQuan Finn quarterback for Miami that can move around a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, man, with DeQuan Finn, and I'm glad you put him on the screen here because I absolutely love this guy. I loved him when he started his career in Toledo. I thought he was so electric there. It was no surprise to me that he got the opportunity to transfer to a bigger program like Baylor. I was disappointed for him that it didn't work out there, but now he's back in the MAC. And man, he's just such a talented mobile quarterback, and he's with a good Miami of Ohio program, man. I mean, this is a good team. Made it all the way to the MAC championship game last year. But man, to answer your question though about the linebackers, obviously I think that speed is maybe one of the first things that you think of when you think of a Christian Allegro attack at Curtis, the kind of sideline to sideline speed, and they are going to need that against a kid that's as mobile as DeQuan Finn. I do think that Allegro, Curtis, and company are going to be able to contain him because I do think Wisconsin has a significant advantage in the rest of the trenches. And when you're talking about those opposing front sevens, maybe, but I'm excited to watch him play, and I think that Finn is going to be a great sort of litmus test for just how athletic maybe this front seven really is.
That sounds right to me. That's a favorite phrase on this Wisconsin football schedule is where is the litmus test? It feels like there feels like there are a number of
it might be one every game, yeah.
You have the Badgers penciled in for a win to open the non-con twice in a row between Miami and at Middle Tennessee. And then Wisconsin gets into the thick of it really, really, really quickly. And I want to touch on the Badgers versus the brand names. That would be the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then jumping ahead a little bit forward to in the Big House against the Michigan Wolverines, at home against the Ohio State Buckeyes, on the road inside Autzen at the Oregon Ducks. Yeah, it feels like a lot of people are hoping Wisconsin can pick off one of these somewhere. It would certainly make for a much more entertaining season. What is your level of belief in Wisconsin being able to maybe pick off one of these brand name opponents?
I mean, so if you read my column, I actually don't have them doing that at any point. But I think that, you're right. People are dying for a signature win. Fickell has gotten really close so many times, that first year, 2023, I think I mentioned it, but he was pretty close to beating Ohio State. I mean, I know they ended up losing by 2 scores or whatever it was down in that fourth quarter. Last year, obviously, the game against number 1 Oregon was really close. You kind of just had a Braden Locke problem in that game. I think many other starting Division I quarterbacks could have won that game for Wisconsin. But my confidence level is just not super high in terms of can they get one of these signature wins on their schedule. Look, last year when I wrote a similar column and I said, you know what, it's time for Fickell to get this win. They're gonna beat Bama, right? Bama's gonna roll into Camp Randall and they're gonna crawl out, and Fickell's gonna get his signature win early. That was obviously a little premature. At this point, when I look at this schedule and I look for sort of these big wins or opportunities for these statement wins, the best that I can kind of give you is that maybe they'll get a couple trophies back. But I just, on paper and looking at some of these games, and especially where some of these games are, I mean, Bryant-Denny Stadium, Autzen Stadium, the Big House, you don't just walk into those places and win, especially with a team that I just, to be quite frank, has as many question marks as Wisconsin still does. So it's really hard for me to see Wisconsin winning one of those games. But, I do think that they have a better shot maybe than they did last year with how that roster was constructed and with the schemes that they were running. But man, it's going to be tough. And yeah, it's just hard to see a win in some of those games.
That feels to be the sentiment throughout the column when you are speaking about these programs is I think this Wisconsin roster is in a better spot than it was 12 months ago. But all of these programs, their rosters are just built at a different level still. It's another step up from where Wisconsin is now. Would that be a fair assessment?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a whole debate. Oh, well, what does progress look like if it doesn't come in the form of wins? And I mean, to some extent, you just have to win football games. And I do think that, for to consider this season a success, progress is going to have to be made in the win-loss column. Now, whether or not that's a difference in one game or more remains to be seen. But man, just going through this schedule, and at times it felt like, okay, I could give it, maybe they win this game. Maybe they could pull off a win in Michigan. How good really is Bryce Underwood? Okay, maybe they beat Illinois. Can Illinois replicate its magic from last year's 9-10 win season, whatever it was? I don't know, but you just look at the schedule and it seems like there's a lot of compromises you're almost making with yourself when you're talking about trying to talk yourself into some wins here.
Yeah, and where one of those wins I think has to come from on the schedule is what you write is the most important game for Fickell this fall. And I think you could parlay that into perhaps the most important game to date for him in Madison. But Seamus, what is this most important game for Luke Fickell this fall?
You're talking about the Heartland Trophy, man. You're talking about Iowa coming into Madison after the Michigan game with a new quarterback who, some people, he throws a 5-yard out, it gets posted on Twitter and people lose their minds. So, maybe they have a legitimate quarterback, maybe they don't. I like how that video was then followed up with lots of fumbled snaps and stuff like that. Yeah. So we'll see. No, Mark Gronowski, though, FCS quarterback coming in. We'll see what he looks like at Iowa. We'll see if they finally have a competent quarterback. I don't really think it matters. I just for this game is always about who can run the football and who can defend the run. But you're right. I do think this will be the most critical game in the Fickell tenure. He's not expected to beat Bama at this point. With the way that the roster is constructed, he's not expected to beat Oregon. So, but you are expected to beat Iowa when you're the head coach at the University of Wisconsin. So I do think that this is easily his most important game.
I think part of it too is just where it lands in the schedule. There was part of the end of 2024 where they lose 5 straight and it just becomes a slog. Here and on yesterday's show, none of us picked Wisconsin to win a game in October, which includes all 4 of us who were on the show yesterday picking Wisconsin to lose to Iowa.
Yeah.
Winning this game against Iowa, I think, would take a really long stretch of the fall in October. You're in the meat of college football season. Maybe some Wisconsin sports fans are still grieving an early playoff exit by the Milwaukee Brewers. Hey, I've lived it time and again. I'm not trying to put that energy out there. I'm trying to temper my own expectations. But with where it is on the schedule, on top of the disastrous way that game has gone in kind of 2 different flavors the past 2 seasons, it just gets the feeling of if you can put a little smiley face in the middle of what will otherwise be a really hard 4-game stretch, I think it changes the temperature on the season while you got to invite Ohio State in next week.
100%. And you know what? Also, to your point, where it falls, but just also, I think the coaching staff and the program knows just how important this game is. I mean, there was the whole thing in fall camp where players were doing 42 push-ups at the end of every practice. I mean, they know how embarrassed they were, and they know how important it's going to be to win this game. I think that, again, you take a look at the schedule and you're trying to talk yourself into wins. And beating Iowa, I mean, just for the identity of the program, at the very least, I mean, it's just something I think that you just cannot start 0-3 to Iowa in your tenure if you're Luke Fickell. Even if let's say that you somehow miraculously win one of these games against one of these blue bloods, I mean, how much does that really matter if at the end of the season you're still a 5-win team on the outside of the postseason? I think that games like this are so critical just for the perception of the program. So I couldn't agree more,
man. I think also it is an indicator of where this program has touted itself as having improved the most this offseason, which is on the defensive front. And then how real is that? Because there are going to be previous games where either you are not equally matched in basically any other game before this one. I think, at least in the trenches. And when it comes to the push-up reps at the end of every practice, that is because of this team's inability to stop the run, this team's inability to be tough up front. And now you are touting very much so Ben Barton putting on a ton of weight on the defensive line, bringing in guys like Charles Perkins, just being more ready for an opponent like this. And this becomes the test of this litmus test of whether or not that is true. And if it is proven that you have actually improved your program where you have said you have improved it the most at perhaps the most important part of the roster in college football, you walk away from this feeling a lot better if you're a Wisconsin Badgers fan, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be a sign that, listen, the schedule's super tough this year. You're not equipped to beat Oregon. You're not equipped to beat Bama. But maybe, just maybe you have an identity. And that was what was so frustrating about those first 2 seasons of the Fickell tenure, man, is that not only were they losing, but they didn't know what they wanted to be. And so you beat Iowa by punching them in the mouth. I mean, that'll warm the heart of Wisconsin fans everywhere, regardless of what happens in those games against the Blue Bloods. So I couldn't agree more, man. I'm glad we're on the same page about this one.
Good. I want to stay a little bit in the trenches because as we've mentioned, you have Wisconsin losing to Oregon. You have Wisconsin beating Washington in what we all agreed on yesterday's show will be a win for the Badgers, but maybe a tricky one at that. But then you have Wisconsin losing to both Indiana and Illinois in games where you mention on both teams for the Hoosiers and the Illini, those teams are really built through the defensive line, the defensive front. In Illinois, consisting of some players on the defensive front who used to play in Madison not that long ago. And a comment in the column that stuck out to me was the Badgers simply aren't as well constructed of a team right now compared to the Illini. That was a little bit of a sentiment on yesterday's show too, where Dylan mentioned you take a look at the program down in there, Champaign. It looks familiar if you're a fan of the Badgers, just the way that team is built up. Where do you stack up the Badgers versus a program like the Illini or the Hoosiers right now?
Yeah, man. I mean, you listen, say what you will about him, but Brett Bielema has done a really, really good job building that program. I think they get something like 19 starters back. And they got a legit quarterback, man. Luke Altmaier. I mean, this is a kid who he had offers to go play in the SEC, elected to run it back. I mean, he's pretty legit. I am a little cautious of their defensive line considering, like you said, they're banking on a couple guys in James Thompson and Kurt Neal. It would seem like at least one of those guys, probably Thompson, is going to start for them. And you look back at his Badgers career and you think, man, okay, he's a long, athletic guy, but was he ever really a difference maker? I'm not sure. I don't know if he can develop into that in Champaign. And they have a couple questions at receiver too, but that team knows who they are. They know how they want to win. They've got a great couple of coordinators. And yeah, man, it's just one of those ones I was, again, trying to talk myself into a win. But you just look at the roster from top to bottom and you say, I'm just not sure that Wisconsin is just as cohesive of a team right now. And you look at Indiana too, man. I mean, that's another one that I think the Badgers would have a much better shot if they didn't have to go to Bloomington. But man, the Kurt Cignetti effect is real. And last year, you turn on some of those games Indiana had at Big Noon, and I mean, that stadium looked like Assembly Hall sometimes, man. It was absolutely jumping. So that's a kind of a sneaky home field advantage they got too. So yeah, as much as you look at those two programs as teams that Wisconsin has traditionally this century had no problem with, you take a look and yeah, you start to question some things.
Yeah, there is. I think there's been some folks saying like programs like Alabama, right? That's not the Alabama of old, and Jalen Milroe is gone. They're doing some turnover. They return 14 starters. There are only four teams or 4 teams in the country that return more. One of those 4 teams is Illinois, which returns the second most of its starting talent. in the country. The only team that returns more starters is Arizona State, of course, which went to the playoff a season ago. And I mean, that's why this Illinois team is as lauded as it was. I think there's some baked in idea of this team is going to take another step forward. And, maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but it does bring back a lot of its talent from a season ago. And I think there's a lot of belief in a Luke Altmaier, who, look, I think if Luke Altmaier doesn't turn out to be an above replacement level quarterback this season, people probably look at Illinois a lot differently by whatever that is, week 13, than we are looking at it in week 0. But for now, it certainly looks to be a better built program from the bones up than Wisconsin is at present. And although by week 13, we very well could have our opinions changed on that.
No, absolutely. And you look at Illinois, and they're one of those teams that you kind of almost, they're such a trendy pick to make the college football playoff.
Really trendy.
But it's for all those reasons that you said, I mean, because you can't ignore those things like 19 starters back. You can't ignore all that returning production, and especially their momentum from last year. So it's almost annoying to kind of sit here and say, oh yeah, well, they're a Big Ten dark horse and watch out, they could crash the college football playoff. But right now, trying to look at this from an as objective and realistic an angle as possible, you sit here and you compare that program on paper and you compare Wisconsin and you just say, yeah, that's a loss. And I'm not sure Illinois is going to be that team that everyone says they're going to be, but man, yeah, it's just hard to see where Wisconsin prevails in that game.
I think the one place where you discussed that returning production, Bill Connolly's, and I brought it up as much as you did. Wisconsin is kind of sneaky in that metric this year. They are 12th in the country per Bill Connolly in returning production. There's always the question of quality of returning production versus just sheer volume.
But not all production returns equal.
Right. I think if you are feeling optimistic about Wisconsin this year, it is, while Illinois ranks 4th in that metric, for example, Wisconsin does bring a lot back. Yeah, you lose some. Yeah, there's a lot of new faces on the roster overall. But you have guys like Dylan Jones back, like Darian Dupree back. There's a lot there, a lot of bones there. Let's get to the last game on the season, where if the story goes as you write it, Wisconsin is right back where it was, fast forward 365-ish, whatever the number is, days forward, and Wisconsin is back trying to win Paul Bunyan's Axe, trying to get bowl eligible against the University of Minnesota. And I don't know that anybody really is hoping for it to play out that way again, and then just have that feeling in the pit of their stomach, given how that game went a season ago. But you have the end result flipped at the end of this maybe lackluster storybook.
I do.
But why do you think it goes differently this time when Wisconsin and Minnesota face off on Thanksgiving weekend?
Well, there's a couple reasons, and I think the first one goes back to sort of the same thing with that Iowa game, which is these are kind of these gut check games for the program. And, if the buy-in and if the culture is truly at a better place than it was last year, which is something that is really hard to quantify, obviously. But if that's the case, that doesn't mean you're equipped to beat Bama, Oregon, Michigan, but it does mean that you have sort of a sense of pride, almost, for lack of a better word. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, these are the games that you look at your schedule and you say, okay, the talent disparity is not ridiculous. It's not negligible, but these are the games that quite simply you have to win. Like I said, it's kind of a gut check game for this program. You have to beat Minnesota. You have to beat Iowa many times if you want to consider the season successful. And I just think that this is a game maybe that if the culture of this team is really improved with their backs against the wall, they'll be able to pull out a win and get to bowl eligibility. Now, that's sort of looking at it through rose-colored lenses, but I feel the same way about the Iowa game. But then if you look at the actual sort of X's and O's stuff, I don't know anything about Minnesota's quarterback, Drake Lindsey. I know he was a 3-star recruit from Fayetteville, and Minnesota was the only Power 4 team that recruited him. I don't know anything about how he's going to look. I do love Darius Taylor, unfortunately, their tailback, but I'm not really sold on any of their other weapons at the moment. And so, in terms of X's and O's and how they actually stack up on paper, I do think this is one of the more winnable games for Wisconsin, just especially because Minnesota's breaking in that new quarterback. But I do think that, backs against the wall, rivalry game, you've just gone through this gauntlet of blue bloods the whole year. I think if there's a time for the culture to show up, then it's the Axe game. So that was sort of my thinking for that one.
That seems as good a place to wrap up as any. Of course, Seamus referring to Drake Lindsey, redshirt freshman quarterback who has a starting gig in Minneapolis, who's thrown a total of 5 passes in college football. So we shall see. For more on each and every game on the Wisconsin football schedule, you can head over to BadgerNotes.com, read Seamus's full column. We'll link it in the show notes as well. Seamus, anything else to share? You can follow him on the website, formerly known as Twitter as well, at Seamus_Rohrer, Rohrer. Anything else that you want to share about the upcoming 2025 college football season before we let you go?
Man, you're putting me on the spot. Not much, man. I'm really excited. I'm excited for all the great content we're going to churn out over at BadgerNotes. I think we're going to be a great sort of alternative destination for some content that you might not be able to find anywhere else. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to it. Counted down the days till that Thursday, 8 p.m. Central kickoff, as like you said, as God intended it for college football. But no, man, super pumped. Looking forward. It's going to be every week is going to be absolutely crazy this year, just with the schedule. And so, yeah, just follow along on BadgerNotes all season. We got you covered.
That's great, Seamus. Thank you so much for joining the show, and I'm sure you'll be back with us very soon.
I sure hope so, Kedrick. I appreciate you, man.
That is Seamus Rohrer, my colleague at BadgerNotes.com. Please give Seamus a follow. Spectacular stuff. One of the premier ball knowers in the Wisconsin Badgers football commentariat, in my opinion. But if you are still here, coming up tomorrow on the show, we are going to be doing our post-fall camp mailbag episode. So hit the YouTube comments, hit the email, talkinbadgers@gmail.com, hit the replies on Twitter, Talkin Badgers. Would love to hear any and all of your questions coming out of fall camp. We're going to hit them tomorrow on tomorrow's show, Friday, the 22nd, and do a nice little dive before we get into game week in Madison. I'm sure we'll have plenty coming out of what I presume is a regularly scheduled weekly press conference for Luke Fickell on Monday, player availability on Tuesday. However, maybe some of that is moved up a day because of the Thursday kickoff, as college football is intended to be played on a Thursday. Anyway, this has been Talkin Badgers for BadgerNotes.com. I am Kedrick Stumbris. You can find me on the website, formerly known as Twitter, at Kedrick Stumbris. Also on Blue Sky. You can follow the podcast at Talkin Badgers. Watch the podcast on YouTube, youtube.com/@Talkin Badgers. If you're still here, hit the subscribe button. What are you doing? If you're watching this long, you know you're going to come back. So hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. It is free. And you'll get notified as soon as we put that mailbag episode into your feed. Until we talk to you all again tomorrow on Wisconsin.